I've had a few scary encounters in my life. Not sure if that means that I'm old or just a creep magnet, but this one still creeps me out. In the early 80s, when I was 8, my family was visiting my uncle who lived in backwoods Missouri. He lived on a lot of land, and the only other people who really even lived on the street were relatives, so no one else just ever happened to be out there. This meant no one ever locked their doors because random family members were always coming by for this or that. One night while we were there, my parents and aunt and uncle decided to go to a nearby town to go bowling because bowling. My brothers, who were 11 and 12, my female cousins, 6 and 14, and I'm female, stayed home. It was still daylight when the adults left, but it started raining pretty hard and got dark quickly. We used to play this game that was essentially hide and seek in the dark house, but we cleverly called it vampire. There was a thin, little mattress on the living room floor that some of the kids would sleep on at night, so the person who was it would lie on the mattress and fold it over themselves like a coffin and count down to midnight. When they got to midnight, they went looking for you. Again, all of the lights are off, and you tried to make it back to the coffin before you got caught. Because the house was in the country, it was pitch black at night. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. What this meant for the game was that, 1, you couldn't tell where the vampire was looking, so you just had to make a break for it, and 2, if you were extremely lazy, and I'm sure by now you can guess which one of us met those standards, you could hide in the living room with a coffin and get to base quickly. Ben, my 11-year-old brother, was it and was doing the normal countdown. I was hiding maybe 6 feet from him. As he's counting, there's a flash of lightning. I don't know if I was already looking at the living room window or if the lightning made me look, but with the backlight of the lightning, I see a man with his face against the window. He had his hands on each side of his face as if he's trying to peer in and looks exactly like the stereotypical creepster, heavyset, scraggly beard, etc. I could feel every hair on my body standing on end. Immediately, I began trying to convince myself that I didn't see what I saw, but then Ben sternly whispered, "If anyone is hiding in here, stay still." I sort of croaked out an "I'm here" right as there was another flash of lightning. Creepster was still there, but no longer trying to look in the window. Instead, he was now looking toward the front door. Ben and I immediately knew what was coming next. From where he was standing, Creepster was probably only 5 feet from the front door. Ben was the same distance, but there was a couch between him and the door. Ben leapt over the couch and locked the door right as Creepster started trying the handle. At this point, I guess Ben decided that it was best to let Creepster know that people were home and that we knew he was there because he flipped on the porch light and then started turning on the lights in the house. This is going to sound weird, but I was too terrified to panic. Having said that, I was relying completely on Ben to know and tell me what to do. He told me to go lock the other doors and was yelling for everyone else to come out and to lock all of the windows. Honestly, the next few minutes are hazy in my mind. I remember everything up until this point extremely clearly. Then I remember the end very clearly, but I'm less clear about the middle. I know that I locked the side door and then the sliding glass door on the back of the house. When we've talked about it over the years, some people remember us seeing him out the back door as well. I don't think I remember that. What I clearly recall is locking the sliding glass door and standing there frozen and hearing Ben in a very calm but firm voice say, "Close the curtain. Listen to me, okay? Close the curtain." So I did. Ben can't remember that part, and I just remember my fear and Ben's voice, so I'm not sure if I saw Creepster in the backyard or not. We tried to call the police, But my aunt and uncle had a stupid party line and it wouldn't work, whether from the storm or from a neighbor leaving it off the hook or whatever. For the record, they are the only people I've ever known with a party line, so this wasn't normal to me either. But for those of you who don't know what that is, in really rural areas, multiple people on the street would actually share a phone line. It would have different rings for different households, but you could pick up the phone and listen to your neighbor's conversation. We also tried to summon help on my uncle's CB radio, but couldn't reach anyone. My uncle was a hunter, so he had a gun rack full of rifles in his room, but my older cousin was on an out-of-town hunting trip and took them with him. All we could find was a BB gun that looked like a real rifle. I vividly remember Ben putting me on phone duty and Scott, my older brother, on CB duty, while he stood watch at the little square window on the front door with the BB gun. Maybe 30 minutes later, Ben said, "He's back. He's coming up the driveway." The rest of us froze in fear, but Ben opened the front door and stepped out on the porch, pointed the gun, and said, "Get out of here right now." Then we hear our cousin Kyle, who lived down the road a bit, say, "You know that's a BB gun, right?" Even though Kyle was only 15, I remember that we felt like we had been saved when he showed up. Kyle seemed really skeptical of our story, like we were playing a trick on him, even though we had no idea that he was coming. But he stayed with us until our parents came home. Honestly, I don't remember if we even told our parents what happened when they got home. There was definitely no police involvement though. We just went on with our trip, but we never played vampire again without some mention of that night. Edit. I just talked to Ben. First, he doesn't have an account, but is so pleased that everyone thinks he handled himself well. Second, he said the story was pretty spot on to how he remembers it, but that the guy at the back door, when we talked about it before, I thought he didn't remember that part, so I was confused on that. He said that as I was locking the side door, we saw Creepster moving around to the back of the house, so Ben told me to hurry and lock the sliding glass door. Those doors are right around the corner from each other, so I was closest. According to Ben, and this is what I thought happened, but I didn't want to say it unless I was positive. As soon as I flipped the lock on the back door, the guy was standing there, just looking in at me. I stood there for a couple of beats looking at him, and that's when Ben told me to close the curtain. We also saw him in the front yard one more time after that. I remembered this all along, but wanted to check with Ben to make sure he also remembered it before I added it in. It was a large front yard with a long gravel driveway. Off to one side of the driveway, quite a ways from the house, was a spot where my cousins parked cars they were working on. I know, so stereotypical. While we were on watch, we saw Creepster messing with one of the cars. It was actually Kyle's. When he couldn't get it started, he walked into the woods that ran beside the house. We didn't see him again after that. A few years ago, I moved to a relatively remote part of my town with my boyfriend. We owned a small section of the land behind our home, which consisted of the woods, a creek, and general shrubbery. I'd take my dogs out there every day for walks, and one day came across what looked like a campsite where a homeless person would live. There was a basket full of sticks and what I assumed was being used for firewood, a mattress, blankets, and tarps. It looked relatively kept, so I assumed someone must be actively staying there. I went off in a different direction and decided to stay away from that area. I had told my boyfriend about what I came across that day, and we were trying to figure out what we should do to eventually remove this person, as this was our land, and we didn't feel comfortable having someone camping out so close to our home. We sort of forgot about it for a few months, until one day I was walking past the area again with the dogs, and curiosity got the best of me. So I went to have a snoop. Once again, I found the same layout, though much more unkempt. There were some leftover food items and the remainder of a fire. I quickly left. The same night, as I was waiting for my boyfriend to get home, I was in the kitchen cooking and facing the window that looked out towards the woods. I thought I had seen someone standing next to a tree, but it was so dark and I have horrible eyesight, so I didn't try to overthink it. But then I actually started thinking, our home and property was fenced, and that little campsite I saw again today, I freaked myself out. Could it be the person that was staying there? I knew someone probably was, but I didn't think they'd want to show themselves, if that makes sense. I carried on cooking and thinking on it, hyping myself up in a bad way. I kept looking around but couldn't see anyone, so I hoped it was just anxiety and my overthinking. And then there was a knock at the back door. We had a curtain covering the window on the back door, so I couldn't see who was knocking, and I wouldn't be able to see from the window where I was standing either. I went to the door and moved the curtain. No one was there. The dogs had started barking at that point, which if you have dogs you know that when you feel anxious, them barking can freak you out even more. I had my Alexa playing music and turned her off to be able to hear better. The dogs were barking in the front room at the windows, but I couldn't see anything. I shut the curtains fully then and calmed the dogs down, but I was feeling very, very uneasy. Suddenly a noise came from the kitchen, like someone was jumping against the door. The dogs started going crazy again and ran to the kitchen. I went after them. The door kept jittering and moving. Someone was trying to get in. The pole that was keeping up the curtain fell and I saw a man wearing what looked like a white face mask, some sort of cover to conceal his face. He kept pushing on the door and I was hyperventilating at that point. If I left out the front door, he could run and get to me in seconds, so I left the dogs downstairs and ran upstairs, locking myself in the bathroom. I felt so scared. I was scared for my dogs. I called the police as I could hear the back door keep being hit and the dogs barking so loudly. I remember how I haven't even been able to tell the police my address before the noises stopped, and I could just hear the barking, but no more bashing sounds. I was momentarily convinced he had gotten in, but surely I'd be able to hear some sort of struggle as my dogs were two large German shepherds. Yet there was nothing I could hear. The police did arrive very soon. My back door was still intact. I spoke to them through the bathroom window as I was scared to come down before they assessed the house from the outside. And I had to calm the dogs down before I let the police in, as the dogs were very riled up then. I told the police about the homeless person who lived in the woods. They had a look in the area and couldn't seem to find anyone or anything suspicious. That was until a few weeks later when myself and my partner, along with the dogs, walked down to that campsite again to see if it had been abandoned or not, on the slim chance that they did have something to do with the break-in. And we found this. The white mask that I spoke about before, how I couldn't tell what it was. It's hanging on the tree. Gloves and boots were hidden in a bag which we found by the creek, soaking wet. Apparently, all this wasn't there when the police went down there that night. Though the campsite, for the first time, definitely looked abandoned. We sent pictures to the police, who came down again soon after. But even though they had all this evidence, safe to say nothing was ever done about it, most likely as there was no successful break-in. We got everything removed from the campsite and taken away in a skip. Who knows what would have happened if the back door gave in? I still worry thinking about it. It's left me with a lot more unresolved anxiety than I already had.